Hey everybody, how's it going? I am here today to talk really quickly about the Unfolded Circle Remote 2. It was formerly the NEEO Remote 2. I have had it in-house since December. The hardware is fantastic. The software has been a steep learning curve for me, but I have it up and running, and I wanted to go over a few things and hopefully maybe answer some questions, clear up some other questions. Maybe some struggles that you've been having to set yours up. So stick around. So the NEEO Unfolded Circle Remote 2. This thing, I signed up on the wait list the day after it went on Kickstarter. I really wanted to back it, but it was the Kickstarter was closing at the exact same time that we were closing on this house, and I didn't want to put something new on my credit card and screw up the sale. Any of you homeowners know exactly what that's all about. So the remote itself, the hardware is just fantastic. It's it's solid. I have seen some reports of the glass screen not being quite as durable, but I don't tend to drop it. So I guess I'm all right so far. But it's hard to tell on this camera. I'll get some other video later, but it's got a really nice screen on it. It's not plastic. It's got physical buttons that have some various indentations and markings on them so you can see them. The buttons are backlit. The screen comes on when you need it to, turns off when you don't want it. It's all configured locally through through a browser interface. It doesn't have to use the cloud for setup or anything like that. So that's actually very nice. Problem is when you open the box, when you buy one of these, if you can get one of these, when you open it up, the instructions walk you through plugging it into the dock and connecting it to your Wi-Fi, and they pretty much stop there. And the software or the firmware or whatever you want to call it on here is very much a work in progress. So I've spent a lot of time struggling with it, going back and forth, trying to get things working. By the way, the dock also is nice, weighted, heavy. It's got Ethernet, USB for the power, and a couple ports for IR repeaters. But anyway, I've spent a lot of time working on getting this up and running. Just really my theater. I have a very concise set of equipment. I have my Anthem processor, I have a Kaleidoscope, an Apple TV, JVC projector, and a Lumagen, and my screen masking system will, not too far off in the near future, will be integrated into this as well. The only thing right now that I'm waiting on is the Lumagen. And that is because it uses an older type of IR. I'm not going to pretend to understand it, but basically it has to be interpreted and then inserted into the Remote 2 database. So I'm waiting on that to happen. But everything else, quite frankly, is being controlled with IP. There's a few commands for the Kaleidoscope that I've had to learn into the remote. But for the most part, it's all being controlled through the network here. So I really like that. And what I've done, and what most people who have had a lot of success with this have done, is I've paired it with Home Assistant. I bought a $99 Home Assistant green box about the same time as the remote showed up. And I've got all my lighting and smart home stuff connected into the Home Assistant, which has done wonders for helping me get this really working the way I thought I wanted it to. So when it comes to the setup of this, I think when it first arrived and there was no documentation, I was kind of frustrated, and I was I was thinking of it as the Harmony, and how do I get all the remotes to work with IR? Because, a Harmony that shows up. You tell it what equipment you have, it pulls up those IR codes, and it just basically works with IR. The Remote 2 can do that with most equipment, well, with a lot of equipment, not most. They're still building that database. But it finally, I finally started to grasp it after a couple months of struggling and came at it from a completely different perspective, and trying to eliminate IR altogether would be the ultimate goal. And then it's all just working, connecting through the network. It's a two-way communication, so the devices are telling the remote what the current state is. It's just a lot more bulletproof method of powering everything. So what I did is a few weeks ago, I just completely erased everything on the Home Assistant and everything on the Remote 2 and started building things up again. And I created my lighting scenes in Home Assistant. So like, for example, when I turn things on, this is the welcome scene that I have in the theater. And during intermission, it's kind of hard to tell, but there are other lighting scenes. So I first created my lighting scenes. These are Govee and Philips Hue light strips that I'm using. But first I created the lighting scenes, and then I added integrations. Rather than trying to go straight in and add devices as remotes, I started by adding integrations, and I added I added the Apple TV has an integration in the Remote 2, and Home Assistant has an integration for the Remote 2. And that, I think they're really banking and relying on Home Assistant to do a lot of the heavy lifting while they finish the work and creating their own integrations for the remote. But it really is doing a very nice job the way it is, because Home Assistant has so many great integrations already. So there's a Kaleidoscape integration that basically allows Home Assistant to pull in all those same cues that a Control 4 system or similar, much more expensive automation system is listening for. So when, Kaleidoscape likes to talk about how when the movie hits the end credits, you can use that as a trigger for your lights to start coming up slowly. And if they put those cues in the credits so that when, say for a Marvel movie and there's a credit scene, it won't bring the lights up until after that credit scene. So, it's kind of fun automation, things like that. And so the Home Assistant integration for Kaleidoscape listens to all those same cues and can also listen to the aspect ratio cues. So that will very soon be triggering my screen masking system, so I don't even have to adjust that manually. The Anthem is, again, being controlled by a Home Assistant integration. All my lighting, again, connected to Home Assistant. So then in the Remote 2, the integrations I have are the Home Assistant and Apple TV. So first I got my Home Assistant set up and configured. I brought in all the devices in my equipment rack. So the Anthem processor, the Kaleidoscape, and the Apple TV is in there, but I'm actually ended up not using that because the Remote 2 has its own integration for the Apple TV. But then also the JVC projector has a Home Assistant integration. So all these are being controlled by the network. The Lumagen is the holdout right now that I'm waiting for, either find someone to build a Home Assistant integration or get the IR codes into the Remote 2. There are a few commands on the Kaleidoscape that integration doesn't actually do, so I'm using some IR for the Kaleidoscape control, but for the most part, that's also all done through Home Assistant and the integration. So once you've got all that configured, you go into the Remote 2 web configurator and you set up your integrations there. So I have a home assistant integration and an Apple TV integration. Once you've got everything in Home Assistant, you've got your integrations configured in the Remote 2, which is just telling it we want to look at this, look at that, look at the other thing. Then you go straight to activities. Skip over remotes for now. So you create an activity, and then you just pull in all of the entities that you need to use in that activity. So for example, my Watch Kaleidoscape activity, I have to first drag in the Anthem Home Assistant integration, the Kaleidoscape Home Assistant integration, the JVC Home Assistant integration, which was a little bit different. I had to create scripts for power off and power on for the JVC, and then bring in those scripts. And then the other entities like the Kaleidoscape Play status. So that's where it's listening to those automation cues. But yeah, and then you build your on sequence, you build your off sequence. You can add in delays there. You just pull, you've got your entities that are in there, and you now add your commands, and then you can click on Edit User Interface, and this is where you build the screen and you tell all the buttons on the remote what you want them to do. So the physical buttons are user configurable, and the screen is completely user configurable. I have it set up so that there is artwork from the currently playing movie on the screen, and some basic playback controls. I haven't set anything up to really dig into settings and things like that, because for that I'll tend to probably bring out the actual remote. This is for day-to-day use. And I don't need to bring in all of my devices, because all the lighting and all those things, those are being controlled already in Home Assistant by telling it when the Kaleidoscape starts playing, add the movie playback, activate the movie playback scene. So it's really getting into that automation, and Home Assistant is doing most of the heavy lifting, especially on the automation side. And then it's just a matter of building your on sequence, your off sequence, and bringing in, building the remote control. So that is really kind of those basics. You need to not think in terms of, okay, I need to program in all my remote controls and then build that activity. Do everything you possibly can with an integration, and only use the IR remote commands. Add those in only as needed, just to round out any control that you need to have. But it's just much more reliable to use IP. So the other thing is, I've got an activity group here. This, I just bring in all the activities that are connected to this system for the theater. That way it knows if I'm watching something on Apple TV and then I want to just switch straight over to the Kaleidoscape, by having them in an activity group, it knows that this is all the same equipment. So when I click watch Kaleidoscape, it'll power down the Apple TV, but leave everything else going and just change the input. And it will just it will turn off what's not needed, turn on what is needed, and make the adjustments that are needed to switch over to the new activity that you're using. If you don't have them in a group, it doesn't necessarily connect them and know that it needs to check the current state, adjust the current state, and turn off anything not used. So the activity groups is another nice thing that you want to use to turn things off. But yeah, so for example, I'll just go ahead and tap on Watch Kaleidoscape, and you will see my house lights went off. It went into the theater welcome mode. I don't know if you heard the projector just kicking on, but it's still basically running. I've got those delays in there, so it's just waiting. And now I just heard the last equipment kick on, and now you'll see in a moment here, it's pulsing here in the middle just because it's waiting for content. It's nothing's playing on the kaleidoscope yet, so there's nothing displaying on that screen. But you can see I've got my play pause button, stop button, and I got this button over here set for the intermission button on the kaleidoscope remote. So there we go. Okay, so now you're going to see the kaleidoscope menu up there. Again, there's still nothing on the remote screen because nothing's playing. But if I go, say, into high fidelity, it's hard to work backward here. I'm going to go in here and we'll click play. Turn my volume down quick here. You'll now see that the high fidelity came up on the remote. All the ambiance lighting has turned off and the movie starts to play. So now if I hit the intermission button, it pauses, it brings the lights up a little bit so I can go, refill a drink, use the restroom, whatever that might be, and then hit play again. And I have a little delay set here, and then the lighting goes back out. So when the movie is over and I hit stop, it comes to that setting. The theater credits also will cue a scene, but the artwork remains on there. And I can always tap the top up here. No. So I can go to the home screen on here, and this is where I could switch to the Apple TV activity. Gives me the state there. I can come back into the kaleidoscope. Again, there's nothing playing right now, so there's nothing on the screen. But yeah, it's really that simple, that easy, and that cool. This remote, this is the real deal. They just really dropped the ball on documentation, and they're way behind on the software and the firmware. But they just recently put out an update a couple weeks ago. It's really fixed a lot of issues. But really, it's just getting into the right mindset when you're trying to program. I'm going to turn some more lights back on. It's getting into the right mindset when you're trying to program the remote. It's kind of getting out of that. I need to add in all the IR stuff and then go from there, and just think you want to maximize how much you can do via IP, via network, RS-232, whatever your equipment might have on it. It's much more bulletproof. It's much more consistent. It's smarter. It's two-way, so it can monitor the current state. As I was playing that back, I was watching here on my Home Assistant dashboard on my browser, and it also reflected the movie, the high fidelity artwork title. And if I flipped over to another activity, it would also show me all that right here. So anyway, that is a quick overview of the Remote 2. I am really, really impressed with the hardware itself. And the software has gotten to a point now where I don't know if it was my brain, something clicked, or what it was. I think it was probably a combination of a little bit of both, but it really is, it's doing exactly what I need it to now. I just need to get the Lumagen working in here, and I'll be pleased as punch. So, do you have a Remote 2? Do you want a Remote 2? What are you looking for to replace your Harmony? I was never happy with the Harmony. It was there because I had to, because my NEEO turned into a brick when Control 4 bought it. So I've been looking for something to replace the Harmony since before Harmony announced that they were going to stop making the Harmony and selling the Harmony. It's great that they still support it. It's great that it still functions, but I've never liked the hardware. I've always thought it felt cheap and it looked cheap. And I'm very impressed with what they're doing with this. I hope they keep going on it. Hope they just keep making it better and better and better. And yeah, Home Assistant 2 has been really fun to play with and mess around with. I've got it set so that when I start a movie in the theater, the lights down here go out, but also the lights upstairs go out if there's no one up there, because we're generally all down here in the theater at the same time. So I've got in those scenes where we're down here watching a movie, we hit play. Not only do these lights go out, but the lights in the living room go out except for one. The lights upstairs in the bedroom, if they're on, they'll go out. And then again, the end credits come on, those lights come back on to make sure we can get up to, find our way up to bed in the dark. So it's pretty fun. It's neat what you can do. I love the idea of not messing with stuff. I don't want to see my gear, and I don't want to have to be messing with my gear all the time when I just want to watch a movie. Sure, we all love playing around with our equipment and tweaking, but when it comes right down to it, I want to watch a movie. I want to come down here. I want it to just work. I don't want to have 5 remotes. I want to have one button, hit play, and have it all work. And this is really getting to that point without spending thousands of dollars on an expensive control system that requires a dealer to come out and program if I buy a new DVD player. So that's where I'm at. Let me know what questions you have about the Remote 2. Let me know what your thoughts are if you have one. Let me know if you know how to write a Home Assistant integration and can help me out with the Lumagen. I'm really interested in getting that done. So let me know. All right. Talk to you soon.